to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for tuning in today. My guest is Dr. Sara Gottfried, who's an obstetrician gynecologist and also a precision medicine practitioner. Her new book is called Women, Food, and Hormones. Dr. Gottfried, welcome to the show. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Lori. So happy to be here.
So the book about women, food, and hormones, women and food, we really struggle with all types of food issues, particularly being overweight. But we oftentimes don't really think about the connection with hormones. And that's what this book is all about. Talk about the importance of hormones when it comes to women and weight loss.
Well, this is really the missing piece, Lori. When I last saw you, I weighed about 20 pounds more than I do now. And at that time, I was trying the ketogenic diet with my husband. He lost 20 pounds. I gained weight. And I hear that from so many of my patients and followers. So I think it's really important to realize that the missing piece is hormones. Women need to do a ketogenic diet that's adapted for them.
And so when you talk about the ketogenic diet, it's hard to believe anybody could really not know what that is because it's all the rage and it has been for years now. And it's basically a really low carbohydrate diet that's high in fats. And as you say, it's sort of a diet that was developed by a man and works really well for men, but women are sort of left out in the cold when it comes to the traditional ketogenic diet. Can you explain why?
Well, we're left out in the cold because about 80% of the research on the ketogenic diet and what's known as metabolic health, or how fast or slow you burn calories, how flexible you are with burning fat versus burning carbs, what we know is that only about 20% of the research participants have been female. So it really took me doing my own research, experimenting first with my body, and then trying this keto adapted for women on my own patients to see what we need in place to really help to balance your hormones. The problem with going too low carb, Lori, is that it has three effects. It can trigger a stress response, which raises cortisol that can block belly fat from being lost. Number two, it can cause problems with serotonin, make it harder to sleep. And number three, it can raise your reverse T3, which can block thyroid function. So you have to get the dose of carbohydrates right, not too much that it causes belly fat to accumulate, but not too little that your thyroid is struggling, you're feeling stressed and you can't sleep.
I really love how you just talk about the various hormones and how they interact and are so important. And what I found really fascinating about your book is that our food, the things that we eat, can actually regulate our hormones. So if our hormones are sort of out of whack, we can actually bring them into homeostasis, into balance, right?
That's exactly right. And this is what was missing for me when I was trying to lose that 20 pounds. No amount of exercise or dieting is going to work if your hormones are out of balance. So when it comes to hormones, you want to make sure that a number of them are in the right place. Insulin, because that determines whether you're going to store or burn fat. It also is important to know about your testosterone. A lot of people think of that as the male hormone, but in women, it is the most abundant hormone that we have. So you've got to pay attention to testosterone as we get older. And then growth hormone is another important one, especially for growth and repair of your muscles, your metabolic rate, and belly fat.
So a lot of women are so interested and are wondering about whether their hormones are in balance. We are obviously emotional creatures, and sometimes when we get really frazzled or get upset easily or have difficulty losing weight, we wonder what is going on with us hormonally. So how can a person know whether their hormones are in balance?
Well, I think the place to start is with the questionnaires that I have in my book. So I've got a metabolic questionnaire. I also have one about growth hormone, things like, do you have longitudinal lines on your fingernails? I also have one on testosterone. These are the same questions that I use in my medical practice. So that's really the best place to start. You don't have to measure your hormones before you go on this 4-week protocol, but I always advise getting your hormone panel done because that tells you where you're starting.
So you talk about your 4-week Gottfried protocol, the Gottfried protocol, and this 4-week plan. Talk about what a person can expect to achieve if they go on it.
Well, the thing to really focus on is that it's going to help your hormones get back into balance. When that happens, you feel more energy. You've got mental acuity, so you can really focus and concentrate. You've got better memory. It also helps you with just rolling with the punches, dealing with some of the stressors that we inevitably face. The three parts that I walk people through are in a particular sequence. So it starts with detoxification, then nutritional ketosis, and then finally intermittent fasting, since that allows people to eat more carbohydrates.
Talk a little bit about intermittent fasting. That's another thing that we've seen, the Hollywood movie stars and so many people talk about. What is that exactly? And why is it so important when it comes to achieving hormonal balance?
Intermittent fasting is really fascinating because it's almost like a loophole that we have in our genetics that allows us to get into ketosis. So when you fast overnight, doing what I call a circadian fast, you're doing most of it while you're sleeping. I advise that you don't eat for 3 hours before you go to bed. So, for instance, you might finish eating at 8 p.m. and then eat again the next day at 10 a.m. So that allows you to have a 14-hour overnight fast. That's the period of time that's been shown to be the best in terms of resetting insulin so you can burn fat, but also not raising cortisol and reverse T3.
A lot of people think that sounds pretty hard when they hear the word fast. They think, oh no, I'm really going to be hungry and that feels bad. Is what can you say to that?
Well, I hear this all the time from my best friend who's just like, okay, you can do it, but that's too much for me. So, what I recommend is that you start with a 12-hour overnight fast. But I think you got to keep in mind here that the reason why you're so hungry, the reason why your appetite is so high is probably your hormones. So, low estrogen can make you hungrier, higher leptin. Leptin is that hormone that tells you to put the fork down, as well as a hormone called ghrelin. That's the one that tells you to pick up the fork. So when you go through ketosis and you add on intermittent fasting, it helps to balance all three of those hormones: insulin, ghrelin, and leptin.
Are there some dangers about being in ketosis? In other words, burning ketones instead of glucose regarding cancer and your risk for cancer?
Well, there is an issue with certain types of cancer. So, what I advise my patients who have a history of cancer or a current diagnosis of cancer is that you consult with your physician. But I can also tell you there's research that we're doing at Thomas Jefferson University, as well as research that I know of at Columbia University, where they're looking at the use of a ketogenic diet to treat cancer. So, a lot of cancer grows based on glucose that's available. So, a ketogenic diet that reduces your glucose can help cancer to be less likely to grow. So, of course, you've got to consult your doctor, but that's one situation where it may be an additional advantage.
I noticed in your book you talked about healthy fats. And a moment ago, you talked about when you're craving certain foods, a lot of times your hormones are out of whack, but also sometimes that's a lack of satiety, where you feel satisfied. And oftentimes, you said in your book that can be achieved through eating healthy fats. Can you talk a little bit about what fats are healthy?
Well, I like the plant-based fats. So we know that those are associated with a better effect, especially on cholesterol as well as blood pressure. So I like the plant-based fats such as avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, nuts and seeds. All of these are really healthy sources of fat. One of my favorite nuts is macadamia nuts. I also have some foods here from my book. We've got 50 recipes. Maybe we'll get to it. And for breakfast, I've got an egg avocado bake. So that's an example of really healthy fat.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break and be right back with Dr. Sara Gottfried. The new book is called Women, Food, and Hormones. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living. It's continuing our conversation now with Dr. Sara Gottfried, and the new book is called Women, Food, and Hormones. Dr. Gottfried, so talk about the 4-week Gottfried protocol. You say that your goal is actually to balance hormones, which makes us feel great. But as a wonderful side effect, we lose weight. Can you talk about what all is involved in this Gottfried protocol?
So the 4-week Gottfried protocol has three pillars. The first is detoxification. And this is so important, Lori. This is what was missing when I failed keto 5 years ago. So detoxification includes eating cruciferous vegetables, the cabbage, the broccoli sprouts, the radishes, the cauliflower. And then the second part is to layer in nutritional ketosis. So I recommend about 70% of your calories from healthy plant-based fat, about 20% of your calories from lean, healthy protein, and then the remainder, 25 net carbs or less per day, so that you can really keep your thyroid functioning, you can help with your insulin, you can improve your sleep, and you can keep that cortisol where we want it, not too high, not too low.
What's the big difference between your protocol and the traditional keto diet?
Well, the piece that was missing for me was that I wasn't detoxifying first. And this is super important. It really was the missing ingredient. And what we know is that we all carry toxins in the body. We were born pre-polluted, unfortunately, with hundreds of different toxins that we're exposed to. Mostly it's your liver and your gut that works on detoxification. But the chemical processes that happen in your liver can sometimes become sluggish. And that was the case for me. So when I went on keto for the first time and I was eating so much fat, I just couldn't get rid of it the way that I needed to. So that's where we want to detoxify with things like the cruciferous vegetables, also the allium vegetables. So that's onions, leeks, garlic. That really helps you with raising your glutathione level. And glutathione is a way of helping support your hormones, supporting detoxification, and also getting rid of the rust, which we think of as oxidative stress in the body. A third part that I think is so essential is that you've got to be pooping every day. You have to poop every morning for keto to really be the most successful.
And what is your opinion about, you touched on it just a moment ago, fats? We know a lot of people who do the keto diet eat a lot of fat in the form of animal fat. So, the bacon and steaks and ribs and chicken and all that kind of stuff. Where do you come down on that?
So I think you have to be careful about animal fats and animal protein. Here's why. Some of us, myself included, have a particular gene variation that's associated with more insulin resistance when we eat saturated fat. So that's my particular problem. It's almost paradoxical because when I eat more animal fat, it makes my insulin not work as well. And so I'm more likely to store fat. So I think the important piece here is to really focus on plant-based fats. That's something that cardiologists agree about. And so we want to be getting those, the avocados, the coconut milk, making sure that we're getting these really healthy fats.
And when it comes to carbohydrates, we know that the traditional keto diet is very low in carbohydrates, but you actually allow what you call carbohydrates that are sort of like the vegetable type, and you call them net carbs. Can you explain what net carbs are?
Well, one of the issues with keto that I see every day in my practice is that people, women especially, are not getting enough carbs. So another thing that we know from the research on keto is that it can harm the microbiome, that collection of microbes that are in your gut, both benevolent and less benevolent. So we want to make sure that we're feeding them with healthy carbohydrates or slow carbs. So net carbs is basically total carbs less fiber. So for an example, if we talk about an avocado, so half an avocado has about 6 carbohydrates. It has 5 grams of fiber. So the net carbs are 1.
Talk about some of the recipes that you have in your book.
Well, we've got about 50 recipes in the book. I'll show you some of my favorites. This is a vegetable fettuccine Alfredo. So I'm a big fan of swaps, making sure that you've got a lot of the foods that you love the most. This is taco salad, which I'm planning to have today for lunch. I've also got this beautiful turmeric braised cinnamon chicken. That's one of my favorites. For the kids and also for adults, especially husbands, I've got this nut crusted chicken. This is almost like fried chicken. But the problem with fried chicken is that it combines high carbs with high fat and not healthy fat. So here we're going lower carb. We've got low net carbs of less than 7 per meal, together with the right amount of protein. A final recipe I'll share with you is baked Jerusalem artichoke with thyme and lemon. I absolutely love this recipe.
All right, we're going to take another quick break and be right back with Dr. Sara Gottfried. The book is called Women, Food, and Hormones. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Sara Gottfried, author of the brand new book called Women, Food, and Hormones. So, Dr. Gottfried, I love the idea of balancing our hormones by eating right. And so by following your plan, in 4 weeks, we should balance our hormones. And as a wonderful side effect, lose weight. Talk about the way we will feel, though, when our hormones are balanced.
The key with your hormones being balanced is that you have better energy. So a lot of my patients complain of fatigue. This is a food plan that really helps you with energy because it gets you to produce something called ketones. That's from burning fat. And ketones do a few things. They give you this ability to focus. So they give you mental acuity. It's almost like, like hearing the angels singing. It's so good for memory. It's even been studied for early cognitive decline and for people with Alzheimer's disease. The other thing that you feel is that your sex drive might be better. So I think a lot of women struggle with their sex drive after kids, sometimes in perimenopause and menopause. It can help you with fitting into your clothes. So I pay a lot of attention to metabolic health. This is not about diet culture, but a big part of fitting into your clothes is making sure that you're metabolically healthy.
I just love that idea that, we're not really going for that, magazine look, the typical look of being skinny or, really worrying about the way you look, but really about your health and the way you feel. But as a fantastic byproduct of all that, you end up looking really, really good. But it's really important that women feel well to you. And I noticed in your book, you spent so much time talking about how medicine is really different for women and men. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Medicine is very different. I feel like what I notice as a woman who is in perimenopause, I notice that I get dismissed more. And I'm a physician, so I know if I'm experiencing getting dismissed or having my symptoms of fatigue or trouble with weight loss brushed off by my doctor, I know that millions of other women are also experiencing that. And it has to change. So we've got some bias that exists when it comes to research. We know that most research is done on men. It's assumed to apply to women. And yet women are not, men with breasts. We've got very different hormonal exposures. We've got very different hormonal balance. And so the way that we eat really needs to be different.
And it's really wonderful. A lot of women will appreciate hearing your personal testimony and can often relate to it themselves. So if you are married, for example, or your boyfriend is telling you what works for him, how he loses weight, and when he's on a diet, and what works for him, and why can't you just do the same thing? This answers the question of why what works for men doesn't really work for women, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, I see so many women who struggle with this very issue. Whether it's the ketogenic diet or another food plan, they just see that their male partner is getting all the benefits. So the way that we close that gap is to really pay attention to hormones. So the hormones that I think you really need to focus on when it comes to fitting in those beautiful clothes in your closet are insulin, growth hormone, and testosterone.
Well, this is fascinating information. We're going to take another quick break and be right back with Dr. Sara Gottfried. Welcome back to Healthy Living, continuing our discussion with Dr. Sara Gottfried. The book is Women, Food, and Hormones. So a lot of people want to know, they'll skip to the end and look at the recipes and say, okay, can I have my favorite foods like hot fudge sundaes and basically sugar? What's your answer to that?
So, the problem with sugar is that it really wreaks havoc on your hormones, especially insulin, but also leptin and testosterone. So, testosterone is that hormone that really helps us with confidence, with agency. It's known for its benefits with sex drive, but it also helps you see a response with the exercise that you're doing. So, I would say no to sugar, but we can get you some comfort food that I think you'll enjoy. So, one of my favorites, for instance, is this dark chocolate pudding. I absolutely love it. It is so delicious, so satisfying, and it's got very few net carbs. I also have a dark chocolate coffee cake that I think is delicious. I absolutely love this. And so there are certain breads, as long as they're baked in a certain way, I've got a few bread recipes in the book that really allow you to get some of that pleasure without ruining your metabolic health, without ruining your hormones.
Well, this is wonderful information, and the recipes are just fantastic. And I would like to say one other thing, as someone who has tried this, is you stop actually craving sugar as much when your hormones are balanced, right?
That's such an important point, Lori. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, the benefit of going on a ketogenic diet and doing it in this particular sequence, men can do it too, but it's really designed for women. What we know is that it makes you feel satisfied. So you're not going to crave the carbohydrates, you're not going to crave the sugar. That's something that most people experience only at the beginning, like the first few days. So once your hormones are in place, you're going to find that food is more neutral. In fact, I would even go so far as to say you can develop food freedom.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Dr. Sara Gottfried, thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to see you again.
Thanks, Lori.
Once again, the book is called Women, Food, and Hormones, a 4-week plan to achieve hormonal balance, lose weight, and feel like yourself again. And thank you for tuning in to this edition of Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. We'll see you again next time.